isn't that one of the most cutest things you've seen? However, this tiny 2 square inch, 24 gram box is one of the easiest to use KVMs I've ever seen, ever had my hands on, and I'm absolutely thrilled to bits about it. Now, KVM, or keyboard video mouse, in the context of what we're talking about today, is a device that allows me to bridge between a device that I'm currently working on or I'm doing troubleshooting on, and a larger device that I want to actually do the troubleshooting with. Now, this does not take advantage of network or IP protocol. This is not a remote access KVM. This is not like the Comet devices that we talked about that were either PoE or the GUI or their Wi-Fi and stuff like that. This is a nice, simple one. It rocks out either $69 and $99 for a standard and a Pro Series version. The Pro Series version, by the way, is a little cap underneath here, has a general purpose input-output 6-port connection inside, and that is used for like Raspberry Pi interfaces. There are those that are using more specialized inputs where visual output isn't as easy to use. Man alive, that cover took a while to get off. There we are in the inside there. There's our 6-pin general input, input output. And again, unless you're running a very specific Raspberry Pi setup there, or you're running very unique hardware environments, you're probably going to be okay with just the standard HDMI. You might have like an HDMI mini on your system, and this is using a fat one, so you're going to have to use a mini to standard HDMI output. Same goes to the USB Type-C, although it does include the following: a USB Type-A to USB Type-C cable, a USB Type-C to USB Type-C cable, and it arrives with... No, that's it. That's all you get. You don't get an HDMI cable included, which feels tight to me. And I know there's going to be users out there going, e-waste, you must have HDMI cables. And, you know, you may have a system that's got mini HDMI. I get it. However, I would still argue that later on during the setup, you do come across a slightly niggling thing for me of why including an HDMI cable would be nice. Let me show you exactly how you connect this. You take the device, you make sure it's in the middle. You've got a USB Type-C connection there, and that on its own is the one that we're going to be utilizing to connect to our client system. On the other side, we need to connect firstly the USB Type-C connection into the box, and then from there, between the two of them, we connect the USB connection into our device we want to control on this side, and then on the other side, we connect our USB input into our PC. Now, at that point, we've now got the control sorted out, and from there, we'd have to connect our HDMI cable into the device. So we connect our HDMI into our original device we want to control, and then we connect our HDMI into this here. Now, at the moment, it looks like this is just a streaming device, right? It's just streaming the HDMI, but it isn't. Our laptop here not only has now got USB speed visual output on its own screen, and also it can be used, by the way, and we'll show it later on in OBS, you can actually output this as a display into OBS, but on top of that, your device here can control the keyboard and the mouse on here. You've got the same fluidity that we've seen before on remote access KVMs, but crucially, it is doing it over direct connection. Some of you are going to hate the fact you can't do it remotely, but still nonetheless, it's nice to be able to do it there on local, conveniently as all hell, on a device we can carry in our pocket. But you remember that point I mentioned earlier on about the HDMI output? Imagine you've got a big monitor connected to this device. That HDMI cable that's connected into this, remember, you're going to have to get behind your monitor and disconnect that HDMI, because this is the one that needs to go into here. The idea of getting around the back of this and disconnecting that cable to connect it into the KVM is slightly less convenient, and I think it would have behooven the company to at least include a short HDMI cable that users who are going to deploy this on the fly can then have their USB connected in, and a small HDMI going into this as well. It is a very small complaint, I'll be the first to admit it, but for the sake of convenience, it would have been nice to have, if you're going to include mini cables like these, to include a mini little HDMI cable to save me from having to get several times into the back of this device to get my HDMI out, to funnel it into the KVM. It's not, as mentioned, an HDMI in and out at the same time. Also, the cables it includes are really short, like crazy short, and as convenient as that is going to be to carry the device, I will say these are just too damn short for most setups. You're barely getting 40 centimeters or so of coverage with the included cables. Again, e-waste, I get it. The fact they've included cables is better than nothing, but it's still a very short cable selection for the setup here. But those are incredibly small, niggling problems to find with something that is ultimately an incredibly easy to deploy KVM there. It does need an application to be running on the device you're going to be using to control. I will say that app, we have explored it for viruses and Trojans and malware, more of that later on, as well as exploring the USB connectivity on this, because let's face it, although this isn't using network or IP or remote relay, it's still using USB connectivity. We are talking about a device that's come from elsewhere that you're bridging two devices together. So later on, we do look into the USB connectivity. But in terms of the convenience and ease of deployment, you can't really fault it realistically there. And you know, the fidelity of what we'd used, that we saw during our testing was really, really good. I will say the lack of internal storage is something of a bugger. There's no no SD card slot, there's no memory card slot, no USB. We'll talk about that more later on, because it does have a storage mounting facility that bridges between the two devices you're connecting, which isn't too shabby. But at $69 for the standard one, and for the Pro Series with that general input-output port there for $99, this is really competitive for what we're seeing here. You've got remote copy and paste, you've got mouse jiggling there. Also built into the software is capture and screen recording as well, but of course that isn't based here, it's based on the client app you are deploying. When I have spoken to the brand about this, they are working on an improved version of this, so do keep that in mind, because you know, as good as this is, I'm sure there is going to be an improved version upon this, and that one's probably going to cost more and has a few extra bells and whistles. But at the very least, this one right now has got a lot going on for what you're paying. It's not the cheapest KVM. You know, if we look at it against the Jet KVM, another one from earlier this year, it probably doesn't feel quite as feature-rich as those. But as a local, stick it in your bag and deploy when you need it KVM, so rather than a KVM like these that you would leave set up connected and then access them on the go, this is where you carry the KVM with you to allow you, when you reach a job, when you reach on-site, to bring down your laptop, to connect that device and troubleshoot AF. But that's enough of the old jibber jabber. Let's head into the desktop client and have a little look about what you can and can't do with this KVM. Right, so here I am on the desktop of my Windows PC. The Kiwi is plugged in, as you can see there. This is the Cytrence Kiwi software running on this Windows machine here, and I'm recording this using OBS, by the way. I wouldn't normally highlight that so early doors, but someone sort of messaged me during the setup for this when I mentioned to a few people I was going to test this, and whether you can use this as a streaming outlet for OBS, and I'm pleased to say you can. So for example, in OBS here, if I select myself another source and I go into video capture, video capture OK, we can see there, right there is our Cytrence Kiwi connected device, and there you go, you can add it as an available source there on the available list there on screen. Again, you're going to change what you see there, unfortunately, because as I navigate the menus, they're going to disappear, but you can do it as an input. Just keep in mind, you're not going to be able to take advantage of the keyboard mouse section of KVM when doing that. But at the very least, this does mean that this does serve as a multi-purpose, not only as a KVM, but also as a nice little streaming USB input. But let's connect directly with the software into our Kiwi. That said, if you do try to use it as a streaming box, the Kiwi, you're not going to be able to use both of them. So if you are going to go ahead and try and use that, don't forget that you are going to need to remove that input if you want to take advantage of it on the Kiwi software there. And now we are on the desktop of my PC. So again, just to let you see, there is the KVM connected device there. In the background is OBS. Let's get rid of that. And there in the background of that one is my actual PC running there. If I smooth that screen down, make that a little smaller, there is my actual menu. And there in the KVM is my little KVM menu there. So pretty decent latency there being connected to. Nice stuff. Before we go into the actual KVM features, the actual uses I should say, let's have a little look at the settings and options. We're going to the settings there. Again, we can change dark, classic, light, etc. From there, there's obviously the font scaling, so we can scale that up, get it nice and big so we can all see it there on screen. You can choose if you want to enable the mouse keyboard capture, so if you want to get rid of that when we do use the capture facilities, the options there. And then, of course, you've got the mouse jiggling control. We will be going through that in a bit. There's the name of our connected device. If you've got multiple Kiwis, this allows you to flick between them. Then you've got your on-screen resolution within the app. Again, hopefully it's just matching the output of the system I am using. But again, if we scale that down, bring that down. We can exit that. As you can see, video resolution is going to disconnect and reconnect. So let's disconnect from that. Let's see it factor in our new resolution. And as you can see, it is responsive to that. There's no delay. It's just allowing us on the fly to be able to change that resolution if we choose to there. So let's make our way back in, come out of it there. And I know it looks a little dated, but frankly, I know this looks somewhere between very early Linux command line and just generally trying to be a little bit retro in its design. Maybe these menus could stand to be a little bit more modernized, but they do the job and they find a line between what they're supposed to be telling you and just generally being usable. So again, syncing the resolution, audio in and out, keyboard changes to legacy mode, enter in your own macros if you choose to. Then we will talk about copy and pastes as well as hotkeys that are factored into when you, for example, on my client machine here, if I was to press Control Alt Delete, obviously it would open up the task manager on my local machine. So it's going to be quite useful to be able to do that via a hotkey, something we have seen before on IP-based KVMs. And then you've got the folder for your local captured recorded footage. We'll do a test of that in a moment. And finally, on the toolbar, what you're going to see, we're just going to add Control Alt Delete as a button prompt there. And there we go. Another neat thing is you can move around this toolbar if you choose. It doesn't have to just live on the sides. It can actually live in the middle of the screen whenever you want it, and the screen reacts accordingly. Again, it is still kind of working towards the background as well. That's something they could perhaps work out in the GUI, but it's still not terrible, same as full screening it there. It still has the bar at the top, but it's very responsive, very easy, and usable as all hell. Now, copy and paste to target is a little basic, but it does exactly what you want it to do. So for example, here on my local machine, here is a sentence. I can just hover over that, right click, select copy, and here on the destination, if I open up a Word doc, as we can see here, go into the paste option, and boom, it's pasted it into the system. Now, limitations, I think with regards to length, this was mentioned in Apparold's Apparold Adventures video. So for example, if we go into another one, we go back into my client machine, and here we have much larger range of text. This is from my GLI testing from a previous video. This is one of their mobile routers. This is quite a large body of text, as you can see on the bottom of the screen. So just once again, going to copy that, make our way back in. Let's see how much of this makes the cut. So paste into target. We can have a little look and see it pasting in there. Because it's doing it generally, again, I think there is going to be errors potentially there when you're doing other inputs, the way it's being put in. It's not instantaneous. Also, look at the length of text it put in compared to that of the early one. So clearly it's quite a small kind of packet data size we're going for the copy and paste there. So keep that in mind. It's still a nice useful feature to have, but arguably it isn't an enormous range of text that are going to be supported by that copy and paste targeting. Again, Control Alt Delete, we can just test that out. Boom, going straight into the Control Delete on the destination device there. Taking a screenshot, this saves it to my local machine. So again, in the pictures folder, if we make our way into that, there's our Kiwi screen there for screenshots. Again, works like a charm. Let's have a little look at what resolution that was captured in. At the very least, it should be exactly 1080p with any luck. Let's double check what the output of that was. Yep, 1080p, lovely stuff. Next up, let's try the video capture recording facility there. So we're going to go for video recording. I'm going to carry on there, do a little stuff on screen. Why not? Let's play ourselves a video file for the hell of it. Just have that recording there on screen. This is a 1080p video file that's playing on the destination device. Let's have a look at the resolution. I believe it is 30 frames per second, the file there that's being played. Boom, 30 frames per second, 1080p. I think that should just about do it. It's a bit of a dull video. It's the power consumption there on that 4-bay U-Star from a previous time. Let's see where that is being saved. So presumably that is being saved to exactly the same directory. So we're going to video directory. There's our Kiwi capture. And this is now playing on my local client. And, pretty good. Doing what I want it to do. Frame rate seems to be absolutely fine. It's everything that I was showing you there on screen. Let's double check. Let's have a look at that. Right click. Go to properties. What did that output in? Hopefully output it in 1080p. And that's at 60 frames. That's pretty darn good there. So again, happy to see what I'm seeing. Next up, you've got that GPIO port there. Again, I'm not using that. Unfortunately, I don't have the features and facilities, but it's nice to know for those of you that are going to consider using this on more bespoke techie environments there, some of the Raspberry Pi stuff. I think I'll include some of these options for you, just to give you some idea about exactly what is possible via that output there. And that's really it. I mean, again, it does what it's supposed to do. I mean, heck, if we look at that, mouse jiggler, and we'll just leave the mouse there on screen. Hopefully I'll have to zoom in, perhaps for you to be able to see it. It is jiggling that mouse. It is doing what it's supposed to do. Stop this going into any kind of screensaver there. Now, as mentioned earlier on, this device doesn't actually arrive with any kind of default storage there. The file sharing is really all you've got. There's no SD card slot, no USB input there, no little chunk of eMMC. This is just the ability, not unlike something we've seen before in something like TeamViewer, to create a kind of back and forth portal for data to be moved over. So for example, we've got these two files here. These are just simple PNG files. I'm able to move those over to the virtual disk, and then from there I can mount that target on the other side. So for example, we'll come out of that there, and then on the PC side, we'll make our way into disk. Let's go for the disk manager. From there, it will start mounting this remote drive, and there is our O drive there ready to go. So from there, we make our way into the machine. So we'll go into our system. There is the O drive, go into test dump, and boom, there are the images that we've been transferring over. And again, that can work in both directions, interestingly. So for example, we've got the file there, and at the moment that has been transferred over, but it's, I'm not going to give them too much sugar for it, because it's, still experimental, but I'm not feeling it's particularly responsive. If we compare those file sizes there, let's go for that. We've got the file size to the image that we are looking at. It is that one. So we compare those side by side and have a little cheeky look for ourselves. We can see that, again, the file is mostly transferred over. It looks like there's a slight difference on my local machine. Perhaps that is some kind of shadow file or something like that. But at the very least, once the files are over, they are definitely visible. I question the utility of this outside of incredibly small files due to the lag factor that you would get when transferring data over, and also just generally how they'd be picked up. It's nice to know you've got this in both directions. I do wonder, however, just how well it transfers over in the other direction if we were trying to pull information from a connected device onto our controlling device. So for example, here's an image here. If we were to carry that over, let's drag and drop that into our virtual disk that we've created there. That's just moving it within the Windows environment. So first, let's see if there's any kind of live synchronization there. So we can have a little look. It doesn't seem to have transferred that over there. I've already deleted some of the files either way, just to see if deletes would be reflective of that. Why don't we make our way back into the file sharing area. Let's have a quick cheeky look. From there, we can unmount the disk. So it looks there that it hasn't really reflected those changes inside that virtual disk yet. So again, if we unmount the disk, we can see that that drive is now there. So we can go ahead and transfer that over if we wish. That's moving that UniFi over there. Let's transfer and remount those disks. Let's have a quick look. So here on the local disk, we can see that we've now got that here on the controlling machine. So it works, but it's not really the smoothest process. I understand that, they probably don't want to have this constantly being mounted, because it's probably going to hit the old bandwidth over USB 3. And it's better having that than no storage, but I'm definitely not going to make any direct or at least positive comparison between this and if it arrived with storage out the gate. But again, at $69, I can't really fault them too much for that. Next up, we want to double check some stuff about BIOS. So what we're going to do is take this USB, this is my Unraid bootloader, and we're going to get that connected into a USB dock there, connected to the device that we are currently controlling. Here on screen, if I refresh that list of disks here inside, we should be able to see that the USB drive has been seen. So from there, I'm just going to go ahead straight away and shut down our machine. So let's go for a complete shutdown. We're going to go from a cold boot. Obviously, because this is a USB KVM device here, we should be in very close proximity to this. Let's shut that down. We've already done a copy paste. So we can get that shut down. And what we're going to do is we're going to boot the system and just see what level of control we have in BIOS there. Again, what I'm going to use is my native keys first. I'm not going to use any of the hotkey inputs or anything like that. This is just going to be my native key presses there. So let's go ahead and get the system booted up. We're going to go with tapping delete F2. I can't remember which one of those it is, but let's go ahead and go with F2 delete. If we have to do this again, why not? Let's throw escape into there as well while we wait for the Minisforum machine. And there we are. We are now in BIOS. So it does allow us to access BIOS like normal. Again, there would have been perhaps issues when BIOS sometimes is at crazy, you know, welcome to the year wickedy wickedy Wild West 2000 resolution, but at the very least, we can still access the BIOS there, we can still play around. We've got that level of control there. The BIOS has not countermanded our ability to use the USB keyboard and mouse, and that's really important because a lot of users talk about KVMs where they talk about the HDMI output only, because that obviously is an incredibly big deal. But some BIOSes, because of the way they load in, the KVM device doesn't automatically pass through the keyboard and mouse element of KVM into the device, but pleased to say that it is available here. So if we go into the boot option there and we just switch the boot priorities up and boot from our USB drive there, let's have a quick look. Let's go straight into this, and we can see it's got secure boot on the device, but at the very least we can still go ahead and get all of those reboots done. Ultimately, it's still nice to know that we've got those options to muck around in BIOS still with this device. And again, for a $69 KVM device over USB, really pleased with that. Next up, let's talk security. Realistically, we're going to want to know if this little USB device is a ticking time bomb that we're introducing into our network. Now, we're also going to have to keep in mind that this isn't even the fully realized product. I do believe this is something going to crowdfunding, correction if it isn't, but ultimately the brand has already told me this is the first revision of something they are going to make better, both in terms of hardware and software. So the results I'm showing you now are the results of what I have received, not the eventual product, I don't think. So make of what I'm about to show you what you will. So for example, if we go into my PC and we go into the download section, and this is the Kiwi conference app that I downloaded there. Let's scan it with Malwarebytes. Same goes with the contents there of the unzipped contents. Let's go ahead and scan these with Malwarebytes just to get some idea of whether these are safe. I've already scanned them earlier on. I didn't find any results, but I just wanted to show you here on screen while it's being done. Simultaneously, we've already got that first file. Absolutely nothing been found there. We can go through the report. Nothing really, you know, no malware, no dodginess, no hack software, Trojan living around inside that software. And again, we'll go for the actual unzipped files as well. Scan those with Malwarebytes, get a second scan going. And alongside it doing that, we also did a scan inside the system of the USB ports, went into PowerShell. And so from there, there's a lot more to get on with, but let's get that there on screen. We'll come into the network monitoring in just a moment. But if we open up PowerShell there, we went through, we found 4 different entries. None of them were indicative of anything to be concerned with. Again, we found 4 different entries that were fairly indicative of KVMs. We ran also the results through an AI as well, something you'll see in the results in another way in just a moment. But everything we saw on there pretty much contained that this is just a KVM doing KVM things. But is it pinging back to another country? Well, from there, what we did was make our way into the UniFi switch that both of these devices are connected to, both the Windows machine that I'm using to control with and the Windows machine that we are controlling. Both of them are running into a UniFi switch here. There's both of our devices. I've selected both of them. I've gone for the last hour of traffic, as you can see there on screen. And ultimately, I saw nothing here to worry about. We saw standard Microsoft background pings there. We saw a couple of update paths, drivers on my laptop at one point there. We even saw when we went through ChatGPT, that appeared there as well. So as you can see, there's no real nasty pings that we should really be concerned with above and beyond the traditional. And again, once we go a little bit further than even the first page, we're outside the remit of the stuff that we've been doing during our testing. There isn't really anything I would say that I'm overly concerned with from the listing we're seeing there. And frankly, again, only indicative of the device I've received here. There isn't anything inherently insecure from what I'm seeing here on screen. Overall, the software package, from what we're seeing it being capable of and everything I've seen with the sort of playing around in the background, this is really nice. It's basic, it's no frills, but a lot of users when it comes to KVMs aren't looking for frills. They're looking for a simple way to control and manage a connected device on the fly. And this thing is going to probably live in my bag for a while as I experiment with this in other ways. But let's head back into the studio and summarize today's review. For its price and for what it's trying to do and its scale, I'd say it does a damn fine job on delivering on its promises. I will say it is entering a very crowded marketplace right now for KVMs, and the lack of remote features on this, be it on the $69 standard or the Pro version, is going to put some users off. Also, The fact it still needs a client app, when some users, one of the appeals of the IP-based units is you can still access them in a web browser scenario rather than having to install a client app on different devices, is going to put some other users off, as well as the lack of internal storage. But for simplicity and portability, there is definitely a market for this KVM. But what do you guys think? Do you think this is the tiny little gadget you're going to keep in the back of your work bag for when you need to do on-site, but still on-the-fly maintenance and troubleshooting between your client device and that of the system you're trying to fix? Maybe. Let me know in the comments if it is. I've done links in the description not only to get hold of this for yourself, there'll be a link to the official website as well in order for you to find out more about any future revisions of this, but also there's a link over to Christian over at Apple Art Adventure, who did a great review on this. It came out, I think, about a month ago. Goes into a little bit more detail about some of the back-end utilization of this, and he's also done some great comparisons on other KVM devices, so I really recommend you check out his video. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.